Okay, as you know, this is part of the graduate Capstone studio, which is a degree requirement, year-long studio. I think this is the second year that we've had it as a year-long studio, and it was about what was it, Mike? It was about a year and a half or a decade ago that we first talked about the. Seems like a long time ago.
It was. I had a full
Um,
head of hair.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
That
was
was
that
20 years
Elizabeth
ago.
Morton that put us in touch?
Pardon me?
Was that Elizabeth Morton that put us in touch? No.
I forget
Yeah.
how we did that.
Yeah. So it was it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Um, but anyhow, glad you're all here. The studio is opportunity for our students to work together in a with a client, kind of in a simulated professional capacity, and this means, as they all know, that they were responsible for pretty much every aspect of this project. And that included the scope, the objectives, the deliverables, putting the groups together, timelines, everything. So, in other words, the students in the studio did all of the work and get all of the credit for what I think is they've done a fantastic job of putting this all together. Um, Also like to thank Mike and the other folks from Families for Safe Streets that are with us, and also those that um, participated and helped out with each of our information requests and other kinds of interactions that we've had over the last year. So the presentations tonight from the three groups, which will be uh, about 10 minutes each, and then we'll have time for Q&A at the end and some comments. Um, uh, is is two semesters or like a year long of work, and I think it really shows. So I will share my screen and then turn over control to. Let's see.
I think I'm first, Tom.
Okay. Uh, and let's see. Do you have access to the screen? No. Let me. Okay. Should have it now. So take it away.
Thank you, Tom. So as you mentioned, I'm kicking it off here, and we broke into these three groups. We decided kind of early on that our efforts would be best served if we all kind of did some more specialized work and focus. So we had the GIS and data group, data advocacy, and communications. And Tom talked a little bit about the studio generally, but for our specific focus, there in partnership with Nova Families for Safe Streets, we discovered a real need for increased pedestrian and cyclist safety in the Northern Virginia region. And a big part of the studio was analyzing publicly available data, particularly the Traffic Records Electronic Data System, or TREDS data that's housed and made public by the Virginia Department of Transportation. And some findings that we found just preliminarily was that there was an 8% increase in bike and pedestrian fatal and severe injury crashes from 2017 to 2019. And we kind of threw out 2020 because of the unusual circumstances, but the last kind of normal years showed a kind of alarming uptick in pedestrian and bike safety statistics. So one thing that we decided to focus on, again in partnership with Nova Families for Safe Streets, was kind of take their near miss survey to the next level and bring that online. And we did this by using a product called Survey 123, which is a Esri application, and we took Nova Families for Safe Streets near miss survey, which was originally on their website, and we made an application that's accessible through mobile phone or iPad or tablet or desktop. We made it more accessible, and we also added this kind of mapping component to it. So there's more precise locations of reported near misses, and trying to be more proactive in data gathering and advocacy for dangerous corridors that maybe hadn't been officially located yet by local policymakers because of the TREDS data, which relies on official police report incident data, but near miss data really attempts to fill in the cracks of what's been officially reported, in trying to, again, be proactive about pedestrian and cyclist safety. So in addition to this mapping question, we just digitalize the questions that collects data on the site, like if it's mid-block or if it happened at a crosswalk or traffic light, and some other characteristics like if the near miss was caused by a driver or a cyclist or a scooter, and some other kind of attributes. And again, as I mentioned, this was tablet and mobile friendly, which again makes, I think, a big difference when reporting a near miss. You can just whip out your phone and report it right there and then. You don't have to rely on memory, which can be faulty, especially depending on how long it takes to get home to record the incident. So making it this kind of mobile friendly and accessible increases the reliability of the data. And kind of tying in with the near miss survey, we created this dashboard, which is meant to be a real-time indicator of dangerous corridors and updates, again in real time, as new survey responses are collected. And these statistics on the side come from the Virginia TREDS data. So this is kind of supplemental to the near miss data that Nova Families for Safe Streets is collecting. And so here this kind of heat map shows existing responses that Nova Families for Safe Streets has already collected and that we manually input into the system. And as you zoom in, the heat map turns to individual responses, and these are overlaid with the state TREDS data. And so you can see that we're filling in cracks of where an official incident that's where the police haven't been called, maybe it hasn't happened yet or hasn't happened often yet, as like down here in this corridor in Old Town. But you start to see clusters like here and up here that are away from the TREDS data, where folks are frequently reporting near misses. And on the dashboard, you can click on each point to see who the near miss offender was. In this case, a lot of them are cars and automobiles, and those are symbolized in red. So you can imagine those are probably going to make up the majority of them. There's also some other great kind of filtering options of the near miss data here. And this is just one example, is sorting by, and this is taken from the language of the survey, is reporting behavior of in this case, we're looking at near miss incidents that have happened between a pedestrian and someone riding a scooter. And so with the kind of early data we were provided, there was only 3 incidents at the time. And so you can, again, kind of make policy decisions based on if we're seeing clusters of scooter near misses or cars in other places. That becomes really valuable. And again, you can click on the data points to see more attributes. You can also sort by multiple criteria. So here we have a driver and near miss incidents that happened in a crosswalk. So all of these near miss incidents have happened at or near crosswalk, or the person inputting the data decided that was the best indicator of the location of a near miss. So again, we're starting to see clusters kind of off of the TREDS data location, really kind of achieving that goal that we set out, is to fill in the cracks of data that reports on pedestrian and cyclist peril in our streets. In addition to the dashboard and the survey, we created a couple of marketing tools for NOVA Families for Safe Streets. These brochures represent a couple of crash statistics from Alexandria and Arlington. We also made one for Fairfax, and these it's thought that these will live on the website, but they'll also be print ready. So NOVA Families for Safe Streets can create these kind of handouts when they're doing public advocacy group, and really these numbers just kind of jump out and really kind of get the point across that more advocacy needs to be done for pedestrian and cyclist safety in Northern Virginia. And these were taken from the TREDS data that I mentioned. Again, this is just a kind of summary of some of the most alarming statistics that we mined from that publicly available data. So with that, I'll hand it over to the data advocacy group.
So I'll be starting with the talking, but Tom, I believe Melody is going to take over clicking through.
Okay.
Okay, so to introduce the data advocacy group, it's myself, Melody Brown, and Owen Albrecht. And the way our group originated was we were originally part of the GIS data group, and we ended up deciding that there needed to be a group to fill in the gaps between the larger group that was working on strategic outreach and then the group that was focusing on the data. And so we ended up taking the 3 of us as a group and became the data advocacy group, which ended up working on advocacy and outreach materials that focus solely on this near miss data survey. And so basically our primary objectives were to collaborate with the data analysis group to communicate the data collected and analyzed, as well as inform the public on how to interact with the data. We also were going to use that to create a combination of literature and media presentations that we will discuss further in this presentation to demonstrate how to submit the near miss data. We are also looking to further educate people of all ages and backgrounds on pedestrian safety and research education's effectiveness in decreasing injury risk. So the first outreach material that we came up with was called, or what was a press release. And this was identified as one of the Family for Safe Streets leadership's high priority deliverables. And so this press release announced the introduction of the new and improved near miss and dangerous intersection survey. So this was created through the combination of past Family for Safe Street press releases templates, internet resources, and collaborative editing process between both the data advocacy group and Family for Safe Streets leadership and others that were interested in the cause. And basically it highlights the importance of the new survey and how the collected data will lead to improving pedestrian and cyclist safety in Northern Virginia. And I'm going to pass it off to Melody to take you through the rest of the products that we came up with.
Okay, can everyone hear me okay? Okay,
Yes.
awesome. So another deliverable our group was responsible for creating, and that was also seen as a high priority item by the organization, was a tutorial video on kind of how to navigate as well as fill out the new and improved near miss and or dangerous location survey that you saw that was developed by the GIS data group and previewed in the previous slide. So this video was done by using, I guess, some screen recording capabilities on my laptop. And it kind of describes the information that users need to provide and how that information will be used for data collection efforts related to pedestrian safety advocacy. And I actually have a clip of the tutorial I'd like to show everyone just so you all get a feel for what it encompasses. And then we'll also later be sharing the link with the organization as well as others who are interested in viewing it. So here is the screen recording. I'm going to hit play and let me know if you all can hear it.
It's pretty quiet, Melody.
But it's, yeah.
Okay. I think we might have to turn it up on your end, Tom.
I think yeah, it should, that's all the way up. So
Okay.
it's just going to be, it's just going to be a little bit quiet.
Okay. Well, I'll hit play again. The information that you provide below will not only help us identify locations that would benefit from safety improvements, but allow us to further our street safety advocacy efforts with policy. Having given you a brief introduction, let's get started with the survey. First, indicate in the drop-down box below the statement your involvement in the near miss incident. Were you walking, driving, biking, or a witness? Next, fill out the date, approximate time, and whose behavior you are reporting per the options provided in the drop-down box. Then identify why or how the near-miss incident occurred. Multiple boxes can be checked, and please select all scenarios that apply. The map located below the incident location subheading helps users to mark where the incident occurred using real-time GPS technology. For accuracy, you can either type in the address or intersection, or if you're not sure, you can also drag and drop the pin to the area and it will geocode the location for you. This video is... Okay, so that was a little clip of the tutorial we came up with. I apologize for everyone not being able to hear it, but hopefully when we share it, it'll blow you guys away. So the screen recording itself is actually hosted on YouTube. So that means it can be easily embedded either on the organization's website or within emails for advocacy efforts that they send out to PTA listservs and things of that nature. And it's also publicly available for others who want to view it. So if you just type in the YouTube link, you can easily access it. And additionally, if you click on the closed caption option on the video, you can either ask for English translation, or you can ask for other languages. So that also makes it accessible, I guess, to other groups who would be interested in viewing the video and or taking the survey and learning how to use it. And kind of in addition to the screen recording, we also decided to create kind of a complimentary handout that's in a way a transcript of the video. So it also walks you through how to fill out the survey in a thorough yet concise manner. So as you can see over here on the right, users can kind of find out how to fill it out in 4 steps. And this particular deliverable can be either accessed digitally, so they can put it on their website, or it can be physically passed out to the public. And a really cool thing about this handout is that it has a QR code at the bottom. So anyone who has the handout can take out their smartphone and scan the QR code, and it takes you directly to the survey. So that's another way to access that as well. And then our final deliverable involved creating a listserv that would allow Families for Safe Streets to easily disseminate information and communicate with K-12 schools in Fairfax County, Arlington County, and Alexandria City. So as the lead on this specific task, our teammate Owen actually initiated the process of developing an Excel spreadsheet with all of the schools and their respective contact information. And then kind of after that, we split amongst the 3 of us, obtaining the respective PTA information. So different points of contact, like their emails for each particular association group. And all of this is compiled in the Google Doc you see pictured to the right here. So you have the school name, the PTA web address, and who the primary contact is for that PTA. And then using this information, Owen formed a Google group that was meant to host all of the emails in one location. And we actually sent out an initial message to confirm that we had the right point of contact for each PTA. And in the end, we ended up having about 175 emails that were confirmed, and they were compiled to create the Nova Families for Safe Streets PTA listserv. And we have shared the Excel document with the organization for them to use to add relevant contact information as needed. And the one really nice thing about it is the Excel document can also be easily downloaded and converted to be used with other platforms like MailChimp, which I think is the platform that the organization currently uses. And right now we're also in the process of getting that Google group transferred into that platform. So all of this goes to say that our goal was to create materials that Nova Families for Safe Streets can not only use as soon as possible, but that they can make changes to over time. And I really hope that we exceeded their expectations, but now I'm going to pass it on to the final group, which is tailored around communications and outreach.
Perfect. All right. So I'm going to introduce for our group. I am part of the outreach team along with Abigail and David. So our biggest goal obviously was promoting outreach for the organization. So we wanted to increase awareness. We wanted to get a larger membership base, especially as we were moving under this Nova Families for Safe Streets umbrella. We really wanted to help grow the 3 individual chapters and definitely the 2 newer chapters with Arlington and Fairfax. And so many of you are aware we went through a very kind of step-by-step process. We actually, before we even designed this process, we started by having a pre-visioning strategy meeting with Mike and some other members of the team to really get an idea of what they wanted and what they were looking for. And so in doing that, we were able to kind of figure out what direction we wanted to take our project moving forward. So we started with this step 1. You see the analysis of best practices. So what we did, and you guys have all of these reports in the email, but what we did was look at 11 organizations that were similar to Families for Safe Streets. So we looked at things like the Fairfax Alliance for Better Biking. We looked at the Washington Area Bicyclists Association. We looked at all of these organizations to figure out what they were doing in all of our target areas. And then next, we, of course, went and looked at our organization's practices. So we looked at Alexandria, Arlington, and Fairfax Families for Safe Streets and figured out what they were doing as well. And so in doing that, we were able to kind of figure out where are the strengths that we currently have for each chapter, but also where are the areas that we want to improve on moving forward. And so we used all of this information, all of these reports, all of the research that we gathered, and that's what kind of led into our final outreach strategy campaign. So you'll see a lot of the recommendations, they stem from our research in other areas and also from what we realized the organization was going to need moving forward. And so obviously, like I said, our goal is to raise awareness for the organization, but also their advocacy efforts, grow their membership base, and grow the opportunities available to them. And so we looked at 5 target areas to be able to accomplish this under the scope of outreach. So our first one was targeted outreach for businesses, associations, and government and public agencies. This one really stemmed from our conversations in our visioning strategy that a lot of the connections are strongest in Alexandria. Obviously, it's been around the longest, but we wanted to really develop those for the other 2 areas as well. And so number 2, we looked at press releases and media contacts. We want to increase the awareness. One of the best ways to do that is to get in contact with people who typically do that in this region. So number 3, mailing lists and newsletters. We have a mailing list and we have these newsletters, but we wanted to figure out how can we improve them and grow them. Also, social media campaigns. Every chapter is active across all the social media platforms of Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, but we wanted to continue to identify ways to grow our following, especially as we're in this virtual environment right now, and our in-person outreach is kind of limited. And then next, we looked at website ideas. So obviously those 2 newer chapters, the Arlington and Fairfax websites, aren't quite as developed as the Alexandria chapter, but we wanted to give you some recommendations to figure out how to improve them across the board. And then of course, like I mentioned, we identified these recommendations and implementation action plans for each category. And what we did was rank our recommendations in priority order. And then we also provided a step-by-step implementation plan for every single one of those recommendations to help the organization figure out how to actually move through the process of implementing every one that we talked about. Now, a more in-depth overview of these elements, this targeted outreach was really to build a network. We wanted to help with coordination in the future. We wanted to help grow advocacy efforts. Not only that, but we also wanted to increase potential sponsorships and funding opportunities for the organization, especially with relationships with maybe some area businesses. And then those press releases and media contacts, reach new audiences, reach people who haven't heard about Families for Safe Streets yet, and make sure that they are aware of what's going on in their region. And so we have generalized and specialized content, not only for each locality's area, but also for the Nova region in general. Those newsletters and mailing lists, maintaining and sustaining connections with members is really important to us. We don't just want to add member after member, we also want to maintain those connections that we do have and make sure they're updated on all of the opportunities available with Families for Safe Streets. Social media campaigns, like I mentioned, it's a virtual platform right now. It's something we all are pretty aware of going on at the moment. And so really helping to raise kind of our engagement and our following on all of those platforms that the organization currently uses. And then lastly, those website ideas, making it user-friendly, making sure it's easy to navigate, whether it's that near-miss survey like the other groups we're talking about, or just the website in general with the resources that they're trying to promote across the board. Now, if you look at, we have 15 recommendations. I'm going to give a pretty brief overview of each of them. However, they are all listed in much, much more detail in the report that we sent to you guys. But starting with targeted outreach. First goal, increase partnerships and sponsorships with local businesses. This is what I mentioned. We want to kind of increase the opportunities available when it comes to funding, because a lot of the recommendations that follow do require a bigger volunteer capacity. Some of them do require more resources. The best way to do that is to partner with some of our local businesses. And this idea actually came from a conversation we had initially where somebody mentioned, hey, why are we not partnered with local biking shops and things like that? So in your campaign, you'll see we have a list of what we call like related businesses, potential business sponsors. And so it's all of the businesses in the area, whether Arlington, Alexandria, or Fairfax, that are either cycling related, running related, things like that, that might be willing to partner with the organization. And even if they can't sponsor, at least having them aware and potentially sharing some of those flyers that were just talked about in those businesses. Now, growing a following with targeted association outreach. So you guys sent us a document of some of the associations that you had compiled. We added to it. We added several to it. We also added links to all of the cycling clubs in the area, the American Cycling League, just different opportunities to further engage with these associations. And again, increase awareness, increase membership by reaching out to those groups. Now, connecting with relevant agency contacts. This is a definite thing that came out of one of our conversations was we want to build those public contacts, whether it's police stations or transportation commissions in the locality, really making sure that we can grow and maintain connections with those groups, because obviously a lot of public outreach is going to be done. It's really important to have those groups aware of what the organization is doing. So we list a lot of step-by-step plans for how to increase those relationships as well. And our biggest kind of last recommendation in this area is creating a sustainable liaison network. So something that we learned from our best practices report that was obviously you will need a lot of volunteer capacity to be able to do what we're talking about. We recognize that, but you're also going to have to be very organized through this whole process. You have 175 PTA outreach contacts, you're going to have business contacts, you're going to have association contacts. You have a lot of things going on. And so to be able to maintain all this contact, make sure there is frequent communication, make sure groups are being updated, groups do feel like there's an established relationship, we suggest this liaison network. And that way you can appoint liaisons, have a dedicated outreach team. These liaisons will be responsible for whatever category they're in charge of, and they will help maintain the conversation and the communication between each of these groups. And that way, like I said, we're not only creating contacts, but we're maintaining them. And that way you really do have a strong coordinated network, and your liaisons will be better able to serve the groups that they're working with. So moving on to press releases and media contacts, first thing we wanted to talk about is creating and publishing press releases. So you'll see in the appendix of the report that we shared with you, we have 3 what we call generalized press releases. They're pretty broad for each of the organizations. So they kind of talk about the volunteer opportunities, they give some basic information, they talk about how to get on the mailing list, they give the links to the social media, just some general press release templates that you can use, you can adapt however you want to, and share those with different organizations. And so those are in the appendix. You have those. Like I said, you can be flexible with how you want them, but we wanted to at least provide you with templates so you could have something to start with when it comes to press releases. And then engaging with regional media outlets. So of course we have our locality media outlets. We also have those regional outlets that we really want to engage with to make sure we're covering a broad area. So in your outreach strategy campaign, you have a list of media contacts that we developed for each locality, the person, the organization, telephone number or email address, and then you also have regional media outlets. So we identify the Connections newspaper, which obviously is a very big media regional outlet for us up here, but we also talk about the usage of things like apps, the Nextdoor app, and things that do have a very regional control. And so that's detailed in your report, but we really wanted to kind of give some ideas of how to maybe engage that broader scope that we were seeking for. Now the mailing list and newsletters, like I mentioned, there is a mailing list and a newsletter. However, we also wanted to give opportunities to grow those further because it is a great way to stay in contact with people. So growing a larger following, obviously we want to get more people involved, get more people on the mailing list. And we suggest some pretty fun ideas like making a friendly competition amongst your volunteers or your members to see who can get the most people signed up, cool things like that just to grow the awareness of it. Developing a vision. If you are going to have this many people on a mailing list, and there already are hundreds and hundreds of people right now on it, we want to make sure there's a very identified vision that is kind of guiding these newsletters. And so making sure that we have a good idea of what that is moving forward so it's pretty consistent. Interest-based mailing list. So as you do grow the amount of people on the mailing list, maybe breaking it up. If people are solely interested in events, maybe they're on a separate mailing list. If people are solely interested in the advocacy efforts, the legislative efforts, different things, giving them more of an opportunity and more flexibility to really key in on what they want to do. And that really developed out of something we saw in some of the other organizations we looked at, was that they were able to do that, and that kept people more engaged because they weren't just getting emails that were kind of broad to everybody. They were getting emails on what they wanted to get emails on. And then lastly, publishing a NOVA-wide newsletter and magazine. So we recognize this is obviously probably pretty long term, but we wanted to throw it in here anyways. So you are kind of developing under this NOVA Families for Safe Streets umbrella. So potentially having that NOVA-wide newsletter and maybe in the future doing something cool like a magazine. This is something we learned from the National Families for Safe Streets organization. They have this magazine called Reclaim. Really cool, has a lot of cool opportunities in it. And so potentially, if you're moving in that larger direction, maybe that's something you could consider down the road. So social media strategy, this one is pretty straightforward. Obviously building out your following. Making sure that you are following people on social media, making sure there's timely response to comments, make sure there's consistent posting, everything like that to make sure you are very strongly present on all the platforms that you have. And that kind of leads into the other recommendation, which is having a content library. You have 3 chapters, you have multiple social media platforms for each of them. It's very difficult to maintain all of them. A content library is the perfect way to have a social media coordinator who's in charge of it, but it also allows members to contribute. Whoever's a social media coordinator doesn't have to come up with every single post. Let members come up with ideas, let members share them, right? And the content library would help you keep track of them, help keep them organized, and make sure they are consistent across the board. And then social media management tools also, we suggested. There's kind of a breakdown of the different options in our report, something like Hootsuite or TweetDeck, things like that, that really help you organize, make sure you do have consistent posting, you can schedule posting, which makes it a little bit easier on the volunteers that are potentially being in charge of social media. And then lastly, website ideas. We talked about this in our initial conversation. Some of the newer websites aren't up to par as the Alexandria one, but we still did give some recommendations to help with that process. So first, content and links. You guys are aware, but it's something we identified. There are some broken links. Some of the social media links on the websites aren't correct to the correct chapter. Just fixing things like that, being very aware of those changes that need to be made, and then following website design guidelines. Making sure it's user-friendly, making sure it's easy to navigate, making sure it's understandable for somebody who does not have a background in all of this stuff. Adding resources people can download and take away from this. So we provided all of these recommendations, and you'll see also in the report, but on the screen as well, we did break them up in short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. Now, of course, we recognize this might not be actuality. This might not be the reality that this happens, and this is kind of our recommendation to help you figure out what we think is most pressing, then also what we think is definitely more of a something in the long term that you could potentially do. And so everything identified as short term are things we think can be accomplished pretty quickly. Midterm, of course, requires some extra time. And then long term is something that really requires the time to build upon those earlier ideas and recommendations that will have been implemented at that point. And so lastly, we just want to thank everybody for coming to this presentation, for joining us. We want to thank Families for Safe Streets for following us through this project, for helping us out, for having what seemed like a lot of meetings with us to answer our questions. We also wanted to thank some of the groups outside that have helped us, whether they were groups at Virginia Tech, Esri, different contacts that have helped us build out these recommendations. And then we want to open it up for questions. So anybody can start with questions.
I failed to identify my teammates in the GIS data group. So I just want to shout them out real quick. Benaz Rauf, Azine Shabegi, and Ariel Goldring. They all did a lot of work.
Well, I'd just like to say to all of you, thank you. It's very, very, very impressive. It's you're all hired. Now, you did a terrific job, and we certainly it will help us an awful lot. We will have to figure out the resources to get this done, but the thoughts are good. I like the advertising, the items that you have for us. That's very helpful. You've identified different ways to contact people. That school list, PTA, is excellent. Thank you. And the other tips you have on the marketing, both for the corporates and the individuals, are excellent. And of course the ESRI, the near miss overlay on the treads, that is really superb. That's extraordinary. That's going to be very effective, I think. And I want to thank everybody. Tom, I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to work with these very smart, energetic folks, and we appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Mike. Were there any questions, any comments, reactions to the presentation?
This is Brian. I just thought it was great. This stuff is, I've gone through the survey, and I sent some comments about things. I noticed you already somehow incorporated them into the text. I was like, one day, I was pretty impressive. I was looking for that. So I really appreciate it. I know how much work goes into this stuff, especially writing it and proofing it and putting it in, stuff, form that Tom can absorb in the time he has to review all this stuff. So this is fantastic. And I think, when I look at the outreach parts and, the data outreach, the whole program outreach, having that survey and how well it operates is a great, cornerstone for a lot of that communication. It's just really well done. Thank you very, very much.
So we've got, in terms of the transition, because there are a lot of emails lately that's, it was the proverbial data dump. We have to get it all. Is there a place, would you have a Google Docs or some place where you have resided everything? Okay, and do we have access to that, or?
Yeah, we can share that with you.
Okay, that would be helpful.
I think what we'll do is we'll get all of the pieces organized that you can use. We've got several other kind of, background materials that we were using that you won't need, but we will get that organized and then share that with you.
Okay, and then Jack, on the ESRI, we're going to need a separate time. One of the challenges is of the 200 plus near misses, there's about 80, I think, or something like that are actually on there. Did you have to manually do that?
Yeah.
That's what I was afraid of. Okay, so we'll have to find some more volunteers to help doing that. But I would imagine once you get into the routine, it's not that bad. And probably the hardest is getting the accuracy of where they were talking about. But I don't know.
Yeah, it depends how the responses were. A lot of them I didn't have trouble. It was me and Ariel putting it in. So I found, it is a little time consuming, especially if you have 200. But the survey makes it pretty easy to find locations. So
yeah, okay. And then the transition. So we can do this the follow up, because when you folks graduate and leave, we're going to need so lots of ESRI questions about how we handle this going forward.
Yeah,
and,
we'll arrange for a handoff.
Yeah, and I know you folks can be all official members of Nova Families for Safe Streets. So we welcome you. Given your depth of knowledge, wow, you'd be great. But it's just people that care about safety. That's our criteria. And I'll just tell you a little vignette. We had a situation where last year we advocated for a elevation of the traffic laws to right now, the state of Virginia, if a driver crashes into a pedestrian or anybody, a cyclist, and kills that person, and that person was in the right of way, in the crosswalk, that driver, unless that driver was been able to be accused of and shown to be, quote, reckless, which is a very high bar. It's over 20 miles an hour, above whatever the speed limit is. You have to record it. You have to find it. It's very difficult to get somebody on a reckless charge. Otherwise, the charge was a failure to yield. And failure to yield penalty was a $50 to a $250 fine. Still is. And that's it. There's no points. There's no anything. Even so, a driver, I always would kid, and I came from New York, so hey, if you're part of an illegal gang and you want to knock somebody off, just pretend like you and you run them over. I didn't see them, and you get a $250 fine. So we went, and there were other people, and the state legislators, Sorovell in particular, Scott Sorovell, senator. he put forth a bill, and we talked to him about it, and it's called vulnerable road user. And then we advocated, and some of us went down or went to the different Senate committees, et cetera. And that bill got passed, and it's now law in the state of Virginia, but it's just become in effect. And then it's so new that a lot of the jurisdictions don't think about it or applying it. Well, unfortunately, we had a person in Alexandria in town who was in the crosswalk, all the things that had the right of way, and there's video of all this, and a driver turned left and ran him over and killed him. And we have the police who do our daily or monthly reports, and initially at that meeting, the police said, well, this is a failure to yield. And one of our members jumped on it right away and said, why is that a failure to yield? It should be a vulnerable road user. And so we have since, and then I wrote a note to the chief of police and to the Commonwealth attorney. So they have since rescinded that failure to yield, and that person was recently charged with a misdemeanor 1 under the vulnerable road user. And the man was killed, the widow is devastated, the family's devastated, and at least there can be, depends on the judge and this how the trial goes, but a deterrent that would maybe have some consequence for that driver and get a message out to the community that when you kill somebody, there's more than a $250 fine if you were really negligent on that. It's that type of messages we're trying to get out. So we focus on the near miss, but that's all the good cases where people don't get crashed into. And this is what you folks have done, and we're going to use your social media and your recommendations on media abroad, many things, but the core is the near miss and getting that information out and using that in data analytics. And as you may know, we backdoored a win in Fairfax County at the Innovation Channel because we, at the last minute, teamed up, and Fairfax County didn't accept us because we had no data analytics. But there was another group that did have great data analytics, and now they want us to work because they're using video analytics 24/7 and running algorithms and maybe even some AI to do predictive on near misses, but they're at intersections. They do not pick up near misses that happen in the neighborhoods. And it's got to be a heavily trafficked intersection. So this is another way of getting that information out. And lastly, it also educates the public. It engages them. If they're thinking about it, they're more than likely to be more aware of what it constitutes a dangerous intersection situation, and be a little more cautious to save themselves on that, or when they drive to save somebody else on that. So I think we're very excited. We're very happy of what you folks did. I think there are some comments here in the presentations. So these are some of our folks who so you ought to read that. It's there's some very complimentary comments. So thank you very much. We would welcome any of you to continue on as a friend, we won't ask you to do any work, but if you want to volunteer for something, that's terrific. But no, I think you really elevated our efforts significantly, and that at the end of the day, I think we can get messages out and hopefully save lives. That's what it's all about. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And I'll be happy to work with you on an internship for a student. There may be some continuing students or even incoming students, MURP students that would could work along with you and then get credit towards their degree. So anyhow, I'll be in touch with you about that.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be terrific. If they're the quality, I bet you they are, of the folks that I'm looking at right now. Absolutely. Welcome aboard.
Good. Any other comments or questions?
There was a question from Michelle that she put in the chat, and she said if we have any questions after reviewing the detailed materials, where should we direct them?
To me. And I will, let's see, you can direct those to me, and I'll put my email address in the chat. And then I'll make sure that we get back to you.
Yeah, and you know, I think if they're not here, if somebody had left who asked the question, then they'll send it to Mike, and Mike can always tell them. Or
Right.
me if I get it, but probably Mike.
Yeah, you can do it. Okay. Great.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. A very fine job to the students. Congratulations. Good work. How many of you are graduating? Let's see, by show of hands. Well, congratulations. Congratulations to you. That's exciting. Good. Okay. Well, thank you all, and we will be back in touch in one way or another with some of the follow-up information. So,
Okay. Again, thank you very much.
thanks.